Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely peel back the onion on international economics to see how a nation truly values its global checkbook. I mean, we're looking at something that literally affects every single country on Earth, but it's so often hidden behind a massive wall of complex jargon. So, let's break it down together, step by step.
Okay, let's just dive right into the foundational question of macroeconomics here. Can a nation actually fund its imports based purely on the returns of its exports? Think about it for a second. When a country buys electronics or oil from abroad, it has to pay for them, right? Ideally, the money it uses comes directly from selling its own goods, its exports, to the rest of the world. But how do we actually measure if that exchange is fair, or if a country is winning or losing in the global marketplace? Well, that is exactly what the terms of trade helps us figure out.
To demystify these formulas, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll define what terms of trade actually are. Second, the basics of barter terms. Third, we'll factor in volume and productivity. Fourth, the human cost of trade. And finally, the real value of trade. Let's get to it. Section 1. What are terms of trade? Defining the global checkbook.
Basically, at its absolute core, this is just the ratio of import prices to export prices. It shows if a country is earning enough to cover what it actually brings in. In economics, terms of trade, or TOT for short, acts as a barometer. It throws light on that totally vital relationship between the money flowing out to buy foreign goods and the money flowing in from selling domestic goods.
Now, what's actually super interesting is how this concept simplifies everything into a single index. By taking the index of export prices, dividing it by the index of import prices, and multiplying by 100, we get a baseline number. If your export prices are rising faster than your import prices, your terms of trade are improving. Essentially, you're getting way more bang for your buck on the global stage.
Let's look at a concrete numerical example from our source material to make this crystal clear. Imagine country A exports 700 tons of rice and imports 200 tons of wheat. Just to keep the math super simple, let's say the prices are constant at exactly $1 per unit across both countries. So, country A earns $700 from its rice exports, but it only needs to spend $200 to get the wheat it needs.
And that brilliantly illustrates the math in action. Taking our 700 in exports divided by 200 in imports gives country A a raw ratio of 3.5. Because we multiply that ratio by 100, we land at a terms of trade index of 350. In this scenario, country A is in a phenomenal position. Their exports are easily funding their imports with plenty of value to spare.
Moving right along to Section 2. The basics, barter terms, price versus physical quantity.
But wait, looking just at pure money doesn't really tell the whole story, does it? Economists realized they had to separate the cash from the physical goods. What we just looked at is the net barter terms of trade, which is purely focused on price. But prices fluctuate wildly without the actual amount of goods changing at all. That's exactly why we need the gross barter terms of trade. This ignores price tags entirely and looks solely at the physical volume of goods crossing the border.
To track these physical volumes, economists use specific shorthand symbols, like TG for gross barter terms of trade. We have to use these symbols because, well, the formulas are about to start stacking on top of one another pretty fast.
Let's decode this alphabet superbit and see how this builds our understanding by shifting our focus entirely to the raw physical goods changing hands. Gross barter simply calculates the ratio of the physical quantity of imports to the physical quantity of exports.
So the crucial point here is that by using QM, which represents the quantity of imports, we're asking if the sheer physical bulk of what we get is actually worth the physical bulk of what we give. The formula becomes TG equals QM divided by QX, with QX being the quantity of exports. If we're shipping out, say, 1 million tons of steel just to get back 1,000 tons of machinery, the gross barter terms of trade helps us immediately visualize the absolute physical disparity of that exchange.
All right, Section 3, factoring volume and productivity, the engine of trade.
To get a genuinely accurate picture, economists layered in some serious complexity. First, they calculate the income terms of trade by multiplying our price ratio by total export volume. This basically shows our total importing capacity. Then they go a level deeper with the single factor terms of trade, which actually factors in our domestic worker productivity. Why? Because if new technology makes us way more efficient, selling cheaper goods is actually a huge win for us.
Finally, the double factorial terms of trade balances the whole equation by contrasting our domestic productivity directly against the productivity of the foreign export industry.
Which brings us to Section 4, the human cost of trade, beyond the numbers.
Now, this is a surprising pivot in macroeconomic math. It actually acknowledges that human effort, sweat, and sacrifice must be quantified. Yes, you heard that correctly. Our source text literally uses the words pain and sacrifice. In economics, this is known as disutility. It's the physical and mental toll taken on the workforce to pull those raw resources out of the ground or assemble those products on the factory line day in and day out. This formula literally attempts to measure the human toll of maintaining a nation's export engine. It's called the real cost terms of trade. You calculate it by taking that single-factor terms of trade we just talked about, the one that includes domestic productivity, and multiplying it by an index representing this disutility, this real cost of production. It's a pretty profound acknowledgement that selling cheap exports might look totally fine on a national spreadsheet, but if it requires immense, painful labor from the population, the real cost to the nation is actually incredibly high.
Finally, Section 5, the real value of trade, sacrifice, and satisfaction.
So, this final equation asks the ultimate question. Does the satisfaction we gain from imported goods actually outweigh the pain of producing the exports? This is called the utility terms of trade. It multiplies that human pain index by utility, which is just a fancy economics term for satisfaction. It literally weighs the joy we get from imported stuff against the usefulness of the domestic goods we had to give up to get them. It's the absolute ultimate balancing act of national happiness and effort.
As we wrap up this explainer, I wanted to take a second and just look around at the imported goods sitting in your room right now. Ask yourself, what true human cost and utility balance that global checkbook? We started with simple dollars and cents, and we ended up measuring human pain, sacrifice, and satisfaction. You see, the terms of trade isn't just a sterile financial metric. It's a constantly evolving framework trying to capture the true holistic value of human exchange across borders. Keep asking these big questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.